Welcome to the launch of the book, Driving Sustainable Innovation, How to Do Well While Doing Good, which is the ninth in the series of books that Brightline and PMI has developed together with our great partners from Thinkers 50. And then without further ado, I would just like to hand over the word and introduce you to the Master of Ceremony here today, Stuart Craner, who is the author of one of the articles that goes into the book and also the co-founder of our partners, Thinkers 50. So, Stuart, the word is yours.
Thank you, Emil, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So we're here today to mark the publication of Driving Sustainable Innovation, and we have a great session lined up over the next 90 minutes, which will give you a powerful taster for the contents of the book and features a number of the book's stellar list of contributors. So the plan is this. In a few moments, we will have an introduction from Brantley Underhill, who is Chief Community Officer at the Project Management Institute. Then Emil will provide some exclusive insights into the new book before we start our first panel discussion at shortly before 30 minutes after the hour. The first discussion focuses on sustainability, strategy, and innovation. It'll be led by our friend Eddie Conforto, and the speakers are Ryan Evergreen, Kaihan Krippendorff, and Hamilton Mann, a brilliant trio. So following that session, we are joined by Lenka Pincot, who will guide us through the final stretch on how to organize for sustainable innovation. Again, we have a great collection of speakers: Alice Bolton from the Boston Consulting Group, Heidi Musser, and Marco Cesarino. So we hope you can stay with us for what promises to be 90 minutes of insight-laden discussion. Now, to get things rolling, I would like to introduce a short video from Brantley Underhill, who is Chief Community Officer at the Project Management Institute. With 26 years of PMI experience, Brantley is responsible for fostering PMI's greatest asset, its community. So, over to Brantley.
Greetings, everyone. I am Brantley Underhill, and as Chief Community Officer at PMI, you might be wondering what community is at PMI. Simply, it's comprised of project professionals and those who aspire to become project professionals. Bound by a common interest in project management and improving our practice for the ultimate project success, PMI's community is our greatest asset, offering a supportive space for those who want to deepen their knowledge and grow their network in project management. You see, just by being here, you're demonstrating your engagement in PMI's global community. You're making this investment in yourself through this continuous learning opportunity, and we're helping one another by sharing our knowledge and experiences to create valuable outcomes and successful projects. And your efforts matter because at PMI, our purpose is to maximize project success to elevate our world. Projects really can make a difference, whether it's designing greener buildings with renewable energy or to improve the labor conditions of workers on any project. Projects need to be accomplished in a responsible manner and even in a sustainable way. Sustainability is about how organizations manage financial, social, and environmental risks to ensure their business can continue to operate regardless of obstacles such as resource shortages, environmental disasters, and social and political events. It also relates to green practices and business continuity planning. Sustainability drives innovation, growth, profit, and corporate strategy these days. And we can prepare our organizations to address the societal upheavals that are approaching rapidly. Consider PMI your partner in your journey. We are eager to support and advance our community's efforts, bringing us together, knowing that anyone, anywhere in the world is looking to up their game to be 1% better than yesterday, to make their local communities and organizations better. It's this challenge and excitement that gets me going every day, knowing that change happens through projects. And through our efforts, both individually and collectively, the positive impact we can create is exponential. We all know that the world is facing major challenges, particularly around digital disruption, climate crisis, demographic and economic shifts, labor shortages, and civil, civic, and equality movements. Each of our actions creates an effect, an impact. This impact can be positive or negative. It can be intentional or unintentional. And with conscientious stakeholder engagement, we can aim for positive impact and done well and in a sustainable manner. This could mean improved workplace health, protection of human rights and international labor standards, and even ethical sourcing and supply chains. So, how do we make projects both successful and sustainable? That's why we're here today. Over the next 90 minutes, you are going to hear from industry experts, thought leaders, and practitioners. They're going to be highlighting some of the key takeaways from the latest book from PMI's Brightline initiative, Driving Sustainable Innovation, How to Do Well While Doing Good. As this new book demonstrates, and as you'll hear during the webinar, organizations can do the right thing for the planet and its citizens while doing the right thing for their shareholders. To do it right and to truly reap the benefits of sustainability, it needs to be a genuine element of the organizational culture. Leadership must believe it. Employees need to buy in. There are examples of companies that are doing it right, several of which are highlighted in this book. The result is a comprehensive and insightful compilation offering proven solutions and suggestions for leaders looking to harness the power of ingenuity to drive sustainability within their organizations. Unilever's stated purpose is to make sustainable living commonplace. Their purpose is tied to their culture values: respect, integrity, pioneering, and responsibility. Leaders empower their employees to make decisions. They have clear sustainability priorities, and they measure their progress. In 8 years, between 2015 and 2023, they reduced Scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions in their operations by 74%. In 2019, Siemens set a goal of becoming carbon neutral by the year 2030. Siemens incorporates its sustainability efforts into the products it manufactures. According to the company, the products sold to customers last year alone will, over the course of its lifetime, avoid around 190 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions. These are two of the many examples highlighted in the book. Sustainability is critical to help us address the major societal challenges we face, and we need to do more. We published a report this year on sustainability and what distinguishes leaders in the field from others. 74% of respondents said sustainability is a core element of their organization's purpose and strategy. However, only 43% said they had decision-making authority to execute change-supporting sustainability initiatives, and 76% felt employees at their organization need to develop new skills to meet their organization's sustainability goals. Let us help you. Let us help one another. Together, we can aim higher, we can do more and faster to deliver successful and sustainable projects that elevate our world. That's why we're bringing you this program today. So, thank you. Enjoy the webinar. Let us know what you think about the book and share your own stories of impactful change with us.
So thank you, Brantley. I think making sustainable living commonplace is a really great clarion call. So now to focus on driving sustainable innovation. I'm handing it back to Emil Andersson to give you a guided tour of the big ideas behind the book. Over to you, Emil.
All right. Well, thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Brantley, for a great introduction to our webinar here today. I'd like to spin off on Brantley's talk and say a few words about PMI's current perspective on sustainability, the reason why we created this book, and some of the content that goes into it. So I hope you didn't go unnoticed for you that earlier this year, the World Economic Forum released a report on that highlighted the greatest global risks in the 10-year horizon from now. And the top risks were related to environment, and it's also followed by technological and as well as the societal risks. Of course, these are immense problems that cannot be solved by a single individual or a single organization. but it has to be through collective efforts at a global scale. And as a first step in taking action, we also need to understand what sustainability actually entails. Sustainability is not a nice thing to have or a one-time effort where you do something good for the environment or something good for the community around you. It goes way beyond that level of commitment, and it should be part of who we are, how we think, and how we act now and in the future. And of course, this is much easier to say than to actually do in reality. We did a research together with Harvard Business Review Analytical Services in January this year, where we identified some of the top challenges to achieve meaningful impact through sustainability efforts. First one is deciding where to focus your efforts in order to achieve desired impact. So in other words, understanding what areas related to your business that can yield the most impact. And if the anticipated impact is unclear, it's also difficult to secure the right funding and allocation of resources. So, and even if that happens, we also see that investments in sustainability are among the first things that are cut in difficult economic times. Measuring environmental and social impact can be a very complex story, considering the vast business ecosystem and different touch points of an organization. So for an example, having inconsistent or uncomparable data can be a contribution to the challenge of actually measuring and understanding where if you're making an impact. And as we've seen in our research, there are many drivers for adopting sustainability as part of the business, but still many organizations are struggling to understand what tangible outcomes would look like and what returns they would actually yield. So unclear return on investment is another one. And then lastly, the pressure for short-term results can often get in the way or trump long-term benefits, where you're focusing on innovation with the lens of sustainability. Despite all these challenges, we believe, as Brentley was touching upon here, that organizations that are truly championing sustainability have to go all in. Sustainability has to be part of the vision, the purpose, the DNA of the organization. It should be a value-creating force that not only make the business more environmentally friendly or socially responsible, but also spur ingenuity and new ways of solving problems and providing solutions. So before we move forward, I just wanted to do a quick poll with a statement to check what your level of agreement is to this. Our organization has realized innovative solutions for offerings and operations from our sustainability efforts. So you can strongly agree, neither, or disagree, or strongly disagree. It's around 17% agreeing or strongly agreeing with this statement, 50%, over 50% also agreeing, and some are a little bit uncertain whether it actually there is a connection between sustainability and innovation. Well, according to our own research, those organizations that are very effective in implementing their strategies, their sustainability strategies, are almost twice as likely to benefit from innovative solutions for their offerings and operations. So let's take an example here. We have John Deere. I think most of you guys know what John Deere does, but it's a manufacturing company in the agriculture business, and they aim to provide machines and better tools for farmers, while at the same time address the externalities that are created from the farming productions and processes. And through their product development, John Deere aims to set the industry standard for sustainability in 2030 by integrating a circularity principles in their product life cycles, and at the same time also reduce the Scope 3 carbon emissions that are created by 30% through investing in different engine efficiencies, electrification, renewable fuels, and so on. And John Deere is just one of many organizations that are doing good work when it comes to sustainable innovation, but we know that there are many organizations that are still struggling to find their way, much related to the challenges that we just shared. So that's why we created this book. We at PMI and Brightline want to contribute and be one of the leading voices by advancing knowledge and ways of thinking about sustainability in business and society. We also want to use the voices and knowledge from leading thought leaders, practitioners, researchers, executives to help us explain how business leaders can go about sustainable innovation. And when tackling these broad topics, and when we wanted to create this book, we wanted to create a narrative that resonates well with business leaders and give them accessible, quick, and practical insights that they can use in their business right away. So we structured the book in the following way with, begin with the future. It is what it sounds like. It's a section with a couple of articles that are a little bit more future-oriented, sometimes a little bit more abstract, philosophical, at the same time explaining the evolution of the firm and how sustainability is becoming the core identity and part of the purpose for many organizations and delivering value. It also plays with the interlink between advanced technologies, ethical considerations, and environmental impacts. The second one, purpose-driven growth, comes from a point where it's challenging the traditional thinking about growth and how we see sustainability part of strategic decisions. And it goes, we're talking about here sustainability being used as a powerful source for strategy, innovation, and economic benefit, and how it can be used as a growth multiplier in that sense. Third one, rethinking innovation. This section explores innovation of business models, the power of imagination, human expert capabilities, how startups can be used as a catalyst for innovation in larger organizations or also in partnership with them outside. And then also use the aspect of being radical and bold in developing real solutions to solve real problems. We also have organizing for sustainable innovation. And these articles are unraveling some key insights about operating models, project management, organizational agility, leadership, and culture. So you look at more like structure, processes, and people, and how they can be used in order to deliver the sustainability strategies or the solutions that you have found, and they create value out of that. And lastly, sustainable innovation in practice. This is a section where we wanted to give some deeper insight and nuance and tell some stories of organizations that have done great work when it comes to sustainable innovation. So combining different perspectives and contexts, and then also providing some inspiration, lessons learned, and best practices for others to learn about here. We at PMI also wrote our own article called Practices That Take Businesses Impact Beyond Profit. And this is based on the research that we just shared a little bit of. And here there are 4 key takeaways that we'd like to share with business leaders today. First one is that we see in research that business leaders that are truly effective in implementing their sustainability strategies need to embed, or actually do embed, sustainability as part of their vision and purpose. And what we like to call it, they do it for the right thing, because it's the right thing to do. Second one, it also needs to be driven by an empowered executive leadership team that has the right resources to drive the initiatives and authority to hold others accountable for the sustainability decisions that are made. And third, foster organizational culture and employee growth. We argue that organizations that they need to build in trust through open, clear, and transparent communication in order to alter the mindset and behaviors, as well as equip the employees with the right training, knowledge, and tools to succeed. And last key here, to share, successful organizations engage their entire business ecosystem, as we've seen in our research, such as customers, suppliers, and partners in their efforts. So this way, they are more likely to agree on factors ranging from values and purpose, but then also standards and processes in specific products, as well as the entire value chain practices. We hope that you will find this book really useful and easy to adopt in your business. Before we move forward in this webinar, I'd just like to leave you thinking about some fundamental questions while you're tuning into the panel discussion here. And the first one is just, what are the greatest challenges or barriers in your organization when it comes to being sustainable? And what are the possibilities for innovation in your organization's offerings and or operations that helps you reach your sustainability goals? And then a last point, which relates to research that we're currently conducting. Is there a way you can leverage AI as a catalyst to meet your sustainability goals? So think about those questions as we move along in the panel discussion. So that's all from our side here, and I would just like to hand over the word to Stuart again.
Thank you, Emil. Lots of food for thought. We now have people from more than 20 countries in our live audience. There's common themes in some of the comments and questions. Now it's time for 30 minutes of discussion on sustainability, strategy, and innovation, featuring 3 great contributors to the book. Leading the discussion is Edivandro Carlos Conforto. Eddie is Director of Thought Leadership and Research at PMI. He's also an author, a former MIT research fellow, and is someone who really understands the dynamics at work in making things happen to transform organizations. Eddie is joined by Brian Evergreen. Brian has worked at Accenture, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft. He's the founder of the Future Solving Company, an advisory company that helps leaders solve for the future, do strategy better, generate clarity, and make breakthroughs in the era of AI. And he is the author of Autonomous Transformation, which was chosen as one of the best books of the past year by Thinkers 50. Alongside Brian, there is Kaihan Krippendorff, who is the CEO of Outthinker Networks, a global think tank comprised of corporate strategists, innovators, and entrepreneurs shaping the future of business. Kaihan is also the co-author with Rob Walcott of a book I've been recommending to everyone I meet called Proximity. Check it out, it's just recently come out. And we are also delighted to be joined by Hamilton Mann. Hamilton is the Group Vice President of Digital Marketing and Digital Transformation at Thales, a senior lecturer at INSEAD and HEC Paris. He's a member of the Thinkers 50 Radar community for 2024, a mentor at the MIT Priscilla King Gray Center, and a speaker at the MIT Platform Strategy Summit. So that's a great trio and a strong basis for a fantastic discussion. Over to you, Eddie.
Well, thank you so much for the kind introduction. I'm here with my fellow contributors, and I hope we're going to have some interesting discussions around their contributions and their articles. So I want to start with Brian. You discussed in your article that in the early 20th century, a lot of innovations, they were beneficial, but essentially they were created with a different mindset. They were creating probably not consider all the future impacts that those creations, whether it's a product or a service or even a business, will have an impact. And today's systems, for example, built on unsustainable foundations like energy, for example, oil and gas, they also they have a lot of benefits because our society runs on some of them as a foundation, but they also pose a lot of problems. So I want you to describe a little bit about your concept about future solving and how can business leaders adopt this mindset and this new thinking.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be a part of this and to have contributed to the book. In terms of future solving versus problem solving, I think it's the general mindset and advice that we hear time and time again is that you have to start with what problem that you want to solve. But the trouble is that solving a problem is the craft of getting rid of what you don't want. That's, essentially looking for a long list. And the truth is, it's an infinite number of problems we could solve at any given time. And when it comes to sustainability, the level of complexity that we're facing with all these different interdependent systems, which you described a bit in your question, Eddie, is so complex that it's difficult to figure out which problem we should solve and how it's connected to this network and this hairy mess of problems at any given time. And so what I've proposed as a alternative to that is future solving, which is the craft of getting what it is that you do want. And so it begins with choosing, okay, what future is it that we want to build for? And so if you said, for example, we want to have zero carbon emissions within our organization, that's the future that we want to build toward. The next question is, well, what would have to be true for us to have zero carbon emissions within our organizations? And coming down from that, you can create a set of theories of things that would have to be true. And then each theory breaks down into various hypotheses. If you picture a sort of decision tree of all the things that would have to be true for those theories to be true, and so on until you get to where you are today, at the limits of all the data that you do have and all the empirical knowledge that you have a fairly clear line of from a scientific perspective, hypotheses and theories that you can go test. And then you can go search the market and say, okay, NIST already invested in, or the National Science Foundation already invested in trying to have someone prove or disprove this theory over here. So we don't need to invest in that right now. Let's watch the fact that they're doing that. And then you could look at another whole maybe branch of theories and hypotheses and say, okay, maybe we can come together with various organizations and determine, since this isn't core competency for us, can we together leverage our shared, the fact that we all are doing business and we have a balance of trade with a particular company that's in the space that we think would need to make this breakthrough to try to, bring them on board. And so working across the ecosystem with a shared vision for the future, as opposed to independently in silos within our organizations, going project after project, trying to do what a data-driven, proven in advance return on investment, which I know most of us, that's the pattern that we've been taught, but it's not working for most organizations, trying to prove in advance the value that you'll get from something, as opposed to starting with, well, based on the reasoning that I have as a person or that our team has, or, that all of our experts think we should go in this direction, but they can't prove it with data. So how else can we prove that? And the truth is we can account for the reasoning behind why we think we should do that as rigorously as we account for data. And it actually creates a more scientific approach to going and tackling some of these large challenges.
That's thank you, and that's a great start. And I wanna go back to that for a couple of examples, ideas, but I wanna jump and ask Hamilton, because Hamilton, in his contribution, his article, he touched on AI, which is everywhere today. And you mentioned a couple of things very interesting. Before I ask you a question, Hamilton, you talk about how the great potential that AI is going to have, not only organizations, our life, but also fighting for climate change, for example, or helping organizations become more sustainable, whether this is using real-time data or being available or reducing or optimizing process, for example, to save energy, etc. Energy consumption, we know, especially for AI, is a big challenge. So my question to you is, given your experience and what you discuss in your article, what are the concerns and opportunities around using specifically AI for driving or supporting sustainability efforts in organizations in our society? Can you describe a little bit about your thinking?
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me, and thank you also to let's have that honors to be part of the book. I think sustainability is a very key topic, right, for the years to come and for the next generation. So this is basically something that we need to take on. So the article that I titled actually "In AI We Trust," because I think there is a lot of trust, which is great around AI. It is a kind of a call for responsibility, actually, right? So I will, let's say, underline that word, responsibility. And so in that article, I wanted to explore the dual-edged nature of AI in the context of sustainability. And the overall message is this: technology, of course, AI included, right? Even when created with the best intentions for the greater good, is absolutely not inherently immune from, let's say, producing adverse effects in societies. And I think this is a key element to acknowledge, right? There is no technology without environmental deaths. Doesn't exist, right? So AI does not make exception. So on one hand, AI has immense, right, immense potential to help address critical issues like climate change, optimize resource use, and enhance environmental monitoring. So this is, let's say, one of the opportunities, right, that we, let's say, have when it comes to, let's say, using AI to solve some of those complex problems that we have. And that was, Brian was, let's say, underlining very well the point that when it comes to sustainability, this is complexity that you need to manage. So AI can help with that. Example will be like the role of that we can, let's say, expect AI, playing when it comes to helping us enhance energy management systems to reduce waste, or in other domains, the optimization that AI can enable in agricultural practices, for example, to lower greenhouse gas emissions, right? On the other end, the development and deployment of AI can also have significant environmental impacts, right? And let's not be naive about this. This is also part of the key reality, right? So it is about, the high energy consumptions, the water use, the electronic waste generations also as well. This is massive, right? So for leaders, one thing that needs to be very much acknowledged, right, as part of their sustainable commitment. I love to talk about sustainable commitment instead of agenda, right? Because it comes also with a way of managing, a way of leading, a way of thinking, okay, beyond the planning. So when it comes to AI, it is about the more powerful AI is, and the more intensive computational power is required for its functioning. This is as simple as that, right? And particularly when it comes to the training of deep learning models that consume vast amount of energy. So this often results in substantial carbon emissions due to the reliance of fossil fuels. And additionally, you can think about the cooling systems for data centers consuming enormous amounts of water, exacerbating water scarcity in already stretched regions sometimes. And the rapid pace, right, of hardware development also needed for AI further add electronic waste to other electronic waste, which all poses serious environmental and health risk at the end. So bottom line, I've built that article as a kind of an invitation for us to reflect on our role in societies, whether you are business leaders, entrepreneurs, managers. You are key stakeholders in societies and you're participating in shaping it, right? And especially if you, let's say, happens to be as part of, let's say, the creators, or let's say the ones that deploys AI models in societies. This article is very much the kind of invitation for us to reflect on, and for sure, let's say, taking also advantage on some of the pathways. I have put, let's say, some perspective on some of the pathways that can be, let's say, taken into account for having a kind of a deliberate action and ensure that our technological advancements benefit societies, not at the expense of the planet.
Interesting. And I think I want to ask Kaihan, because he brought nothing of this will happen or will work if consumers don't buy that idea. So Kaihan brings a really interesting point of view here, which is consumers, you, me, everyone here, we want to consume or have options that are sustainable. But of course, historically, it has a cost attached to that sustainability aspect or feature. So, Kaihan, can you give us some of your thoughts around how given the rising cost of non-sustainable products, for example, or services, because we need to choose at the end, right? We have some parameters if it's not only price, but also quality or your perception about the behavior of the company behind that product. So can you elaborate more what you discuss in your article regarding these trade-offs between cost and the perception and benefits of buying or consuming more sustainable products, and how that could be influencing organizations and governments to help and probably define some of the policies that will help the society transition to a more sustainable life?
Yeah, I think companies should do it for the right reasons, right? They should do it because they are members of a society. They're going to live on this planet in 50 years and 100 years. But I think it's sort of naive to think that that is enough. It's not, they're going to always optimize for what they are designed to optimize for, which right now means what investors want, which right now means short-term profit. And so it's a little bit like me trying to get my dog into the house, right? I want him to come in because it's raining outside, but I use a piece of meat in order to get him in because I know that's what he's optimizing for. And so what I think is hopeful is that the equation is starting to change for companies. Now, the consumers play a role. They're willing to pay a little bit of a margin for a more sustainable offering, but actually that margin's much smaller than what we think it should be. But there are other things that are coming to play that are starting to change the calculus. First of all, we know regulation is coming. That is the way I think consumers and society impose a cost of the externalities into internalities inside companies. And we know regulation is coming. And I can tell you that corporate strategists are starting to price the future cost of regulation into decisions, optimizing, say, what energy do we invest in? Where do we source from? But also we have natural disasters are growing. They've grown from 50 globally in 1994 to 150 today. And the cost of the ones that are over 5 billion have gone from 3 to about 30 a year. Coal prices have gone up 5% over the last 15 years. Wind is down 60%, solar is down 80%. Land-based solar is one of the land-based wind is one of the lowest priced sources of power now. So now it becomes an economic argument. And so strategists are thinking about that. They're also worried about deglobalization. We know that the percentage of global trade that has been traded internationally has grown from 25% steadily up to 60% over the last 35 years. Since 2005, it's just been flat. Globalization right now has stopped. And so there is a need to look for sources that are cheaper and that are more local. That is to say, look for sources that are more proximate, from my book Proximity, that we're going to start sourcing and generating energy where it's needed, creating value where it's needed, creating inputs where it's needed. And so we see a lot of exciting experiments on sourcing local. So like, for example, in the UK, there's a company called NotPla, which stands for Not Plastic. And they take algae and they use that to create a plastic-like substance, and it's going to be used in the Olympics in France. It's going to be used to line boxes and to create water bottles. So it's actually being used. And so, but this is starting to become economical, and because you can source it locally, it's not only better for the environment. I mean, it's not only sustainable, it actually is regenerative, because it can actually improve the environment. So I would argue that the economic pressures are forcing companies to start thinking differently, making different decisions, and that's going to guide them to proximity, which is going to guide them to more sustainable and hopefully even regenerative practices.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And since you mentioned one or two examples, I want to go back to Brian and Hamilton also because part of what you're discussing is about future. And I see a big play when it comes to technology. So I want you both, if you can elaborate or share some examples that you see in organizations when it comes to future thinking and preparation for what's coming in terms of sustainable options and how the technology can actually help that. So it's like a dual approach for the answer here.
Well, I think for kind of a practical, let's say, actions, right, that companies can take when it comes to, say, you're looking at the AI development, deployment. let's say, adoption with a sustainable, let's say, lens, right? Few, let's say, concrete actions comes to mind. First, investing in green data centers, right? Green data center infrastructure is nothing new, and it's very kind of, let's say, kind of forward way to, let's say, maximize that those large data centers is not going, let's say, to adding burden in the situation that we're facing when it comes to climate change and energies. So this is one, right? Another point is very much about thinking on implementing dynamic resource allocation algorithms, right? Dynamic resource allocation algorithms. This is very mechanisms that helps distribute computational task when it comes to real-time demand and available resources, thereby they're optimizing, right, that use. And so this is also part of, let's say, thinking when it comes to designing technologies and designing those, let's say, different AI models and the way you train those models, to figuring out that those reasons that you choose and that develop do also have a role to play, right, when it comes to energies and the way the resources will be allocated. Maybe last but not least will be about adopting, let's say, AI models that are designed, right, to be energy efficient. So technique like model distillation, we call it, where smaller models that is trained to replicate performance of the larger models. This is some kind of a great practices also as well, depending on the use cases that you want to run, depending on the task that you want to, let's say, address with your Gen AI or AI, or say, purpose. To figuring out also not thinking about the large model, each and everything that you want to achieve, but consider also as well some very smaller models, because again the smaller will be also an opportunities to have less energy consumption along the way, and of course less, let's say, also energy is required for the training and the inference. So just three let's say examples, very, let's say, concrete tasks that come to mind. I would say bottom line, right? And I'm seeing, many stakeholders, let's say, having that kind of a reflection also as well. In companies, you get opportunities to work with many providers, with external providers, especially when it comes to those AI models, right? Those what we call the front AI models. So this is also a great call for, let's say, all those companies and these of us, right, working with those AI models to challenge those providers in terms of what we expect from kind of a sustainable point of view, right? Because this is also part of the requirements that you put at the table, right, in exchange of the services that you want to get, that we are, let's say, participating in that conversation per se. Brian, over to you.
Brian?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Hamilton. So in terms of concrete examples, I'll say we have a multitude of examples of companies that are using problem solving today to try to address sustainability. And I think we can all probably attest to the ways that it's not necessarily working when we start with a set of what problems are we going to solve and try to incrementally move toward a more sustainable future. Like, we can make an impact, we can make a dent, but the majority of companies are not necessarily on track to reach the sustainability goals that they've set out by 2030, 2040, 2050, et cetera. They have to push back the timelines because they've made these declarations, and then they've turned and said, okay, let's take all of our existing systems across our organization and all the ways that we're creating emissions and the ways that we're impacting our climate and our planet, and let's figure out how we can incrementally make them better. And so that unfortunately isn't working. But then you have other organizations that are saying, okay, if we start with wanting, and Microsoft, my alma mater, is an example of this, of if we start with, we want to be a carbon negative company, what are the things that would have to be true in order to actually be a carbon negative company? So it might be that there's a system that we're relying on where and rapid experimentation becomes a part of that, like the way that Microsoft put a data center underwater, for example. Or I think Meta did something similar where they said, okay, what if we put data centers in the Nordic countries so that we don't have to pay for AC units the same way. And so as an example, something else that Microsoft did that I was a part of when I was there that I think is an interesting example is saying, instead of saying, okay, we're going to just take a system that we have and make it slightly better, hopefully the accrual of making every system slightly better will get us to these big audacious goals, instead saying, well, what would have to be true for us to get there, and work backwards from there, because it might mean that we need an entirely new system. We have to come up with a new plan, a new way we're going to continue creating this value and sunset this thing that we have been doing. And that's the only path to being carbon net neutral, or in Microsoft's case, carbon negative. And so as a concrete example of something we did there was, we did find a way to make what we calculated to be a 3% global emissions impact theoretically, because we looked at HVAC systems, which are one of the biggest causes of emissions. And we found that there was a way that, leveraging autonomous AI, we could have it optimized, because most HVAC systems are just set up and the settings are placed at the time that they're set up, and then they're never touched again. And yet there's different times of year where different settings are needed. Different buildings have different shades. So even across the entire Puget Sound area of Seattle, there were different buildings with different degrees of shade and sunlight every day, but they all have the same settings. So we quickly developed something that we were able to actually realize between a 15 to 17% average annual carbon emission reduction per building. And we piloted it across, I think, 20 buildings or so in Puget Sound. And we're able to then, once we realized, okay, this actually works, then we realized, we could partner with CBRE and other companies in this space, and we would all be mutually incented to offer this to as many companies around the world as we can. And then they're incented because they're also getting not just carbon emission reduction, which will resonate from a values and a shareholder, and from a stakeholder perspective, but they're also getting a cost reduction. So it's a win-win. It's an easy yes. And so I think finding those kinds of, in this world where we do need to remain, not only we don't only want to be sort of sustainable from a planet perspective, but we need to also have profit sustainability in order to, we need both in order to actually achieve our goals. And so that's an example, a concrete example that we worked on.
Perfect. I want to take some questions from the audience. I want to start with you, Kaihan. This is a tough one coming from Frank. It's a question about the S of the ESG. And he asking, when investors invest in companies, what role do fair wages play? In this regard, how do boards of directors, for example, determine what makes wages fair, including what wages are too high and what wages are too low? Thanks in advance. So I think it plays out around how consumers can actually consume more sustainable products. And I think we have very good examples on the electrification of cars today that are not accessible to many people. So what's your thoughts on that? So let me start with Kaihan now.
That's a very complicated system, right? That determines wages. And I just don't trust, unfortunately, consumers or investors to act yet on the best interest of society over personal benefit, right? So I think that consumers will want to buy the more sustainable option. Their margin, what they'll willing to pay on that, maybe 3 or 5%. So until the margin decreases below 5%, you won't see a lot of consumer adoption of. But there are other things that we can do to change the system, and that is through voting and through regulation. But I do think that what we also need to really think about is our whole model of how we deliver value in the world is not sustainable. We should not be producing energy in a centralized location and then transmitting it with it getting lost as it reaches the end user. We should not be making food in big farms and then we waste 38% of it before it gets to the endpoint. Those servers will not be, I don't think, Brian will know better than me, will not be big centralized servers. We're going to move more towards the edge. We're going to have more compute power in devices closer where they are. So what that is going to do is going to reduce the cost of energy, of food, of other losses that come from transmitting value long distances. We need to throw that away and say, what would it look like to produce the value where and when it's needed? And that will allow us to have leaps of sustainability, not only tweak the model that we currently have.
Great point. Brian Hamilton, anything to add to that?
I really like what you said in terms of, transmitting value long distances. I think that, to your very beginning of how you framed the question, the first question, Eddie, I think it's easy for us to look at the systems that we rely on across our whole society and say, well, why are they built this way? Why are they architected this way? And to conflate profit with greed, when I would say on the one end of the spectrum we have profit, we have greed, which is profit at any cost. We want to make money at any cost, whether it's societal, individuals even. And then the other end, you have altruism, which is good at any cost. And then I think for the vast majority, if we were to take a poll today, the vast majority of people that in the working world are right in the middle, where they're just trying to make an honest living. And they're not necessarily pursuing greed. They don't necessarily have, enough excess that they can then, be purely altruistic. So they're just making an honest living. And anything to the right of that is, okay, we're gonna find ways to do good, but still within the realms of being profitable, is something I call profitable good. And I think that, to your point, Kaihan, I think that's what you're talking about in terms of that proximity, that when you speak of proximity and transmitting value, so many of our societal systems are set up in such a way that the only way people can imagine continuing to stay profitable is to sort of stick to where things are and look and say, okay, if, for example, that all of our systems are scaffolded on top of each other. So if we were to stop all carbon, fossil fuels instantly today, and we just shut them all off, and this is something that I wrote about in the book, it'd be a matter of hours, maybe days, before suddenly all of our hospitals, we have no more energy in our hospitals. Our homes don't have energy, and all of the food supply chains stop. And so we have this complex intertwining of scaffolded systems. So, which on the one hand, we do need to address. And on the other hand, I think that the solutions, when people start to try to brainstorm and innovate around that, it's very easy as a recipe for inaction to think, well, if we make this change, down at this level, and it goes wrong, people, all these people relying on energy or, in their hospitals or for their life-giving sort of solutions will suddenly not have that. And so it can be a recipe for inaction and a negative inertia. So being able to start with, okay, what if, forgetting about that, if we were to build a new society on a new island today, what would we build, and what would be that most sustainable, for in terms of whatever our given sector is, approach to that would be both profitable and sustainable for our planet. And then, can we work backwards from that to where we are today, or do we need to find a way or excess capital to build that and sunset the thing that we've been doing? So just a couple reflections on that.
That's great. We are running out of time, but we have 1 minute before I go back to Stuart. But Hamilton, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just briefly, I think, that question around, let's say the role of the social, aspect of what we are doing. I think it is very much interesting, to challenge ourselves, right? Each and every one challenge ourselves in terms of what that I'm doing, well, by doing good from a kind of a social perspective. And I will be optimistic on that, right? Because I think that, if you look back like 20 years ago, most of the large companies all around the world was not talking at all about sustainability in their agenda, in their corporate strategies, right? So this is kind of a way to look at the futures in the form of optimistic ways. I think that business is business. Of course, we're trying to find out what is the ROI. We're trying to find out where to find out profit. We're trying to look at, short-term type of, measures and KPIs and so forth. But also we are, more and more conscious collectively that we are living systems, right? That is society, right? On which, we have children, mother, grandmothers, etc., that we take care of, right? And so we also, raise the level of in terms of intelligence when it comes to understanding that some tiny action, tiny decision, tiny thing we are doing each and every day at home or at work have an impact in societies. This is coming. This is something growing, right? And when I look at the next generation, I'm seeing that. So my point is to say that, that companies all around the world as always trying to find out or figuring out a way to cope with demand, right? So as far as, the consciousness of what is needed in society to be good, right? It is going to grow. It is also going to shape the demand. So this is also going to, help a kind of a virtual cycle. yes, this is to take a bit of time. This is not going to be happening, you know, in one day. But again, looking back, you know, where we come from, and seeing, you know, a lot of sustainability agenda, responsibilities and commitment coming from, let's say, large businesses, anchor credibility and anchoring grounded example, some grounded activities. So there is hope, and there is, let's say, you know, ways to see the form of optimistic ways that society is, let's say, you know, changing.
Fantastic. So we are right on time here. I want to thank you all. This was just a preview of what's in the book, so I really recommend you take a look on the other articles. Thank you so much, Hamilton, Brian, and Kaihan. Go back to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Eddie, Kaihan, Brian, and Hamilton for a great discussion. It was great that Hamilton ended with some hope there as well, which was nice. I thought that was a wonderful challenge from Brian. What future do you want to build toward? And what would have to be true to make that happen? And I think profitable good outlined by Brian is also the dream team. So check out Brian's work at brianevergreen.com. And Hamilton's point about the role of AI and its power as well as its cost was really intriguing. Look out for Hamilton's book, which is out at the end of the year. And check out the concept of proximity in Kaihan's new book, which is available in all great bookstores. We're straight into our next conversation. Our final 30 minutes in this webinar will focus on how to organize for sustainable innovation. This discussion will delve into the human-centered approach to sustainability, examining how people's roles and responsibilities can drive meaningful change and shape a sustainable future. Leading the way in this discussion is Lenka Pincot. Lenka is the Chief of Staff at the Project Management Institute. She also leads the Enterprise Project Management Office and the Brightline Initiative. With Lenka today, we are delighted to welcome Heidi Musser. Heidi is an accomplished board member, board advisor, and C-level executive who advises and leads businesses on digital transformation and enterprise agility. She has created and scaled resilient organizational structures, businesses, and governance models that can withstand dynamically changing market conditions and achieve competitive advantage. Check out Heidi's TED Talk, and in addition to that, she has edited numerous books and most recently wrote the introduction to Wild West to Agile, which is a fantastic book title. Alongside Heidi, we have Alice Bolton. Alice is a member of BCG's People and Organization, Climate and Sustainability and Public Sector Practices. She works with clients to embed purpose and sustainability into their organizations through operating model, culture, people strategy, and transformation excellence. She has particular expertise in the people and organizational tools to enable climate and sustainability transformation. And we are joined by Marco Cesarino from Brazil. Marco is co-founder of Embraer-X. He is a corporate entrepreneur and leader from Latin America. As one of the co-founders and an innovation executive at Embraer-X, Marco spearheads disruptive innovation within the aircraft manufacturing industry. His passion for revolutionizing air mobility led him to ignite early-stage projects in urban air mobility, while also founding and accelerating digital solutions. So, Lenka, Alice, Marco, and Heidi, the stage is yours.
Thank you for the introductions, and I will go straight to my first question. So, Heidi, your chapter in the book has a title, People Are the Core of Sustainable Innovation. And in your chapter, you talk a lot about embracing change, about agile mindset. You also talk about overall approach to innovation and what we need to do to be innovative. So could you please summarize your views on importance of people and talent in the relation to innovation and sustainability at organizations?
Thank you, Lenka, and thank you to all the panelists and contributors. What a great opening session that was. You know, the very first lesson I learned about technology during my very first business trip ever in the 1980s is that people are more important than technology. And I'm so incredibly grateful that I learned this when I did. It's really shaped my mindset and informed how I lead people, teams, and organizations. So relative to innovation, and this has been touched on already, but rapidly adapting to constant change may be the single greatest competitive advantage in the 21st century. Even more true today in this new age of AI. You see, it's not really what happens to us, it's what we do with it. It's how we respond to change. And we always have a choice. We must never forget that. So sustainable innovation matters because it's the key to building the capabilities that allow people-focused, customer-driven enterprises to operate at market speed. And that's the speed of technology innovation today. So to thrive in this world, we must embrace change. Disruption, it demands courage. It compels us to take risks, to try something new. And it begins with people. Peter Drucker, wow, he taught me so much years ago, but we must prepare people for work that does not yet exist and cannot yet be clearly defined. He also taught us, he taught me that because of this accelerating rate of disruption and innovation, that the only skill that will be important in the 21st century is the skill of learning new skills. Didn't know I was going to have to learn that in my retirement years, but it is true. And yes, we must invest in people. We must invest in ourselves. So I absolutely support Peter Drucker's assertion that the only purpose of an organization, and I believe the role of leadership, is to enable ordinary people to do extraordinary things. So yes, people matter. They're not only more important than technology, this from a retired CIO and technologist, but they are absolutely the core of sustainable innovation. So that's what my article hopes to explore. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great comment, and I can't agree more. And I like the way you used Peter Drucker's quotes in your article to make your point, and especially the point about learning new skills. So I have here a very interesting quote too. It's from John Kerry from 2021, when he said in Glasgow that 50% of the carbon reductions needed to get to net zero will come from technologies that have not yet been invented. So I think that's very telling, that to tackle our sustainability challenge, we need to innovate. And for that, obviously, we need people, which leads me to our second panelist, Alice. Alice, hello. Happy to have you here. So your chapter in the book was about transforming organizations to support sustainability innovation. And that's a very interesting topic, because we know that to tackle sustainability, it's typically not a task for a single person. So if organizations want to contribute to that, they really need to have that mindset across the enterprise. So how does the message of importance of sustainability resonate with executive leaders, with C-suite, when it comes to organizational transformation and sustainability?
Thank you, Lenka. Good question. In my experience, and as we've heard a lot from some of the previous panelists and from Emil as well, from some of the research, it has to start with the case for change. And I say case for change rather than business case, because as we've heard, there is always some element of a business case, a financial business case, but it's not going to take you all the way there. So it needs to be a combination of the head and the heart. There's got to be a strong business case that brings those two things together. And it needs to come from the executive team, the board of directors, and they need to be confident in articulating that. So I think the first step is to actually articulate this case for change. Why is sustainability something that is aligned with the company's values? Why is it important to the existential success of the company or the organization in the next, if it's not in the next 5 years, in the next 50 years, and beyond the financial business case, why is this important? The second step then is to actually help leaders to feel confident and to understand that, because it's all very well if the CEO or the chair of the board is very confident, but none of the rest of the leadership team really understand. When you ask them a few questions, they start to get confused between scope 1 and 2, or they don't really understand the detail. Then they won't be confident in leading that message with their teams. So actually helping them to upskilling them, helping them to feel confident, and giving enough time for them to really get into the issues. And then for me, then this links a lot to what we talked about in our article, was holding them accountable. So you help them, you give them the case for change, but then you need to have something that backs it up so that they actually need to take action. And so that's where some of the harder levers come in around targets, incentives, metrics, governance, but with not doing that in isolation. So you need both. You can't just have the great message and then expect people to follow along, and you can't just have the the targets without the inspiration as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. And so now we move to our third panelist, Marco, who is actually living that, right? And your article, Marco, is about a specific case and where you explain the journey of, I'm sorry, I hope I say it right, Embraer-X. Excuse me for my pronunciation. I actually learned a lot when I read your article. I didn't know that Embraer basically built and lifted up to the air their first plane in, when was it? 1906, right? And then in 2004, which is almost 100 years later, you had a plane that was the first plane that used 100% renewable fuel. And then in 2021, you had a first flight fully powered by electricity, especially by batteries. So you are living this innovation and focus on air mobility. So when you reflect on what was said by Heidi and Alice, how do you see that in context of organization for whom the sustainability is part of your business and really essential part of your focus?
Well, first of all, thank you all. It's an honor to be sharing here. This is a panel with such incredible people, and thank each of you that is watching us. I guess the perception and the sense of urgency that we are all facing, and I loved Hamilton saying that the sense and the consciousness that we are all connected, and once we are all connected, we share the same targets because we don't have a plan B for our planet. So the previous panel covered a lot this sense of urgency, and because of that, we've been practicing and exercising different ways by empathizing with the planet and with the people on how to share solutions, build solutions, experiment solutions towards the future we all deserve and we all need to pave, because it still needs to be paved. And because the aviation industry is in a pivotal, it's at a pivotal moment, requiring this shift towards sustainable practice and innovation to address these environmental and social challenges at scale, right? So as you described, we had some experiments and some real examples that are flying all over Brazil. We have 40% of market share on the this agricultural small plant that is 100% propelled with sugarcane ethanol, which is an abundant feedstock we have in Brazil. So this is a practical example of how we are doing to address the urgency of sustainability solutions in aviation. We are not seeing the projections of air travel going down. On the other hand, it's becoming even more complex. The fact that the population is growing and travel is recovering. We already recovered to the same levels before the pandemic, as we see the charts and the numbers. So we have to act. We have to keep acting. That's why we created Embraer-X to really anticipate the disruption we are seeing for air travel. We started with urban air mobility, deploying a solution for the eVTOLs that is going to help all of us to fly over the traffic with a ride-sharing ride, sharing a ride to instead of waste time in traffic, because we also empathize with people that waste time in traffic. It's not just because of the electrification of the eVTOLs, 100% autonomous, but it's about how we value our time. So those are some examples that we are advancing. And of course, traditional aviation solutions will require sustainable fuels at scale, and we are 100% committed to that. So those are examples of how we empathize with the planet and with the people to advance solutions towards a sustainable aviation future.
Thank you. That's honestly very inspiring. And thank you for sharing all those examples. And indeed, thank you for working on this urban air mobility and helping to save our time. And so I will go back to Heidi right now. So Heidi, what would be your advice for organizations? How to actually leverage their talent? Like, how do you make people wake up in the morning and think, how can we solve urban air mobility, for instance, so that they even think about it? Because there are definitely some industries where I would say sustainability is not yet the first thought that you wake up with that you wake up when you wake up in the morning. So what would you advise to companies how to leverage talents and basically use talents of people to focus on innovation and sustainability?
Great question, and you've started it in the right direction. People are people; they are not resources. So let's start with that. Okay, we can design operating systems and engagement models that create and support healthy ecosystems where we can all thrive. Okay, we have so much to learn from nature about this, by the way. And what I mean by that, ecosystems, environments with numerous feedback loops. This is how we learn. We learn from feedback. Ecosystems with high levels of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, things that Daniel Pink taught us about. Ecosystems where we can adopt and embrace an agile mindset. Ecosystems that support cultures that have some core behaviors as cultural norms. And I believe that the three top cultural behaviors that will benefit people and inspire them are an environment where asking for help is rewarded. To me, this is the key to humility. It's also, I believe, the core leadership discipline. The second behavior, I think, is making mistakes. To me, this is the key to curiosity and learning. Everything we try, it's an opportunity to learn. And then finally, recognizing others. This is the key to compassion. So at the end of the day, the most valuable resources we each have as people, as human beings, are really these things that we cannot see. We want to create ecosystems where creativity, trust, compassion, imagination, endurance, determination, vision, courage, and probably most importantly, resilience. We want to create cultures that have aspects of these things so that people can really thrive.
Well, and I would say that for anyone who is involved in any sort of transformation would agree with that also changing the culture, that's incredibly difficult. So Alice, maybe you can help us out here. So you work on transformations, you work with clients. So can you share some examples of successful transformation towards sustainability and which critical elements had to be put in place to create that culture that Heidi was just describing?
Yeah, there are examples, but I think there are also many examples of companies who are still very much on the journey. But I think probably in my experience, there are companies go about it in two ways. Companies who are serious about sustainability. There are companies who really try and transform their core business and transform everything. And there are companies who think actually that's going to be too difficult. Let's set up something with a new culture, a new mindset, a little bit, Marco, I'm sure, like in your situation, where you can start from scratch, you can start from a blank sheet of paper, and you have the ability to build that more agile culture. You can attract different types of talent that might not have been attracted to your core business. Some of the oil and gas companies, for example, have been doing this with their new energy businesses, but that gives you a an opportunity to to build something with a bigger risk appetite, different ways of working, a different objective, because in some cases those companies feel that to change the very established culture and ways of working of the main business is going to take too long, or is going to be too difficult, or in some cases is not what they want to do, because that business actually works quite well, and for the for the medium term at least, they need that business to continue to generate some profits while they're building something new. So that's one example of how businesses approach it. There's also the approach, which is probably more common, I think, where companies try to transform from the inside, and I would say there aren't huge numbers of examples of companies who've completely achieved that. Someone like Ørsted, the Danish power company, is the one who's shifted completely from fossil fuels to wind energy. That's one of the common examples. But there are many other companies who are somewhere along that journey. So I recently worked with a consumer goods company, for example, who is investing heavily in sustainability, but they're doing that by building within their operations teams, within their R&D teams, new capabilities to look into new materials, new packaging, think about new business models, but doing that alongside their existing business. And often in their case, some of the what can support with that is actually building partnerships externally, because often, if you're thinking about something like new materials, you don't have that expertise internally, nor does it make sense to build it internally in many cases. So actually partnering with universities, with startups who are creating these new materials, then you can test and learn and work out which ones are going to be the ones that become viable, is obviously a much better route to go down. So actually then the skills you need internally are people who know how to build partnerships, people who know how to work effectively in a partnership, rather than people who can do the deep research themselves. So that's a shift as well. And I think for those companies, the most important success factor, in my experience, is treating this as a transformation. It's not, let's get a team over there who's going to do sustainability. It's saying this is a business transformation, in the same way that we would approach any other, culture transformation, cost reduction transformation. We will treat this as a transformation. It needs cross-functional teams across the business. It needs that really serious and boring governance and tracking of metrics and milestones and of roadmaps that you would apply to any other transformation, and the level of funding as well that other transformations might require.
Thank you, Alice. So you're making two very important points. Oh, sorry, maybe even three important points, but I remember two of them. So one is that transformation towards sustainability is a real transformation. It's not a task like, hey, here is a team, do sustainability. It really goes across the enterprise. But then you made a very important point also about partnerships, that companies are part of their ecosystem. They are part of their business landscape. So they want to create an impact. It's not only about what they do internally, but it's also about their suppliers, providers of material sourcing. They are part of some supply chain and delivering to their end consumers and shaping that whole industry. So Marco, I would ask you a question. How is Embraer doing this? So are you cooperating with partners in your ecosystem? And if you do, are there any lessons that you would like to share with other people to inspire other companies how to foster these ecosystems in order to create larger impact?
Yes, of course. It's hard to speak after Heidi and Alice, because the topics are so complete and really speak to my heart. I like to refer. If you browse my LinkedIn, you'll see that I'm an abundance ambassador, because I do believe that the art of possible, to think that is possible, as opposed to the scarcity mindset, because it's just so easy to go to the scarcity and operate into a scarcity mindset. It gives us a handful of excuses to don't take the next steps and go beyond. So I do believe, having said that the art of making possible, it requires a collective effort. It's not a one-man show. So that's how we at Embraer-X, we believe in co-creation, by pairing with the innovation ecosystems and leverage our core competencies, the areas that we know we are good at, with the external competencies that we do believe we are not good at. And this is the beauty. When we are pulled by a real problem to solve, and when we combine competences, we can build amazing things. That's how we did in the very beginning of the urban air mobility challenges, when we paired with Uber and other partners, when they exposed the huge amount of data where the cities are collapsed with the traffic. So this created a movement. And to build that, we are pairing with other partners to create, for instance, the air traffic management system, because we don't have roads in the city skies to offer the solutions. It's not just about the eVTOL. The eVTOL is just a fraction of the solution. You have to offer the traffic system to be able to navigate safely in the city skies. But just giving another very quick example, in aviation today, the operations in aviation today, there is a huge area for improvement. And when we paired with some of our airlines, we could observe how mechanics are underpaid and undervalued, for example. So we created a platform to help expedite the return to service flow when an aircraft is with a small problem or a big problem that cannot take off on time. So it is a race to be able to recover from that situation. And today, the aviation is still operating with 20th century tools, not 21st century tools, that we value people's time by collaborating, by showing and giving the mechanics better conditions to work and be valued, because the passengers are in their hands when they fix very carefully, and they are not seen and then they're not recognized. So it's about a social also a challenge on how to rethink the society, the way we value things, right? And the way we pay and recognize and pay people. So by offering a better and streamlined and collaborating with the mechanics, with the airlines, with different players, we can then rethink this flow and start bit by bit, believing that it's possible, changing for better.
Well, I have to say, Marco, I just love that. And we are coming back to that human-centric approach and basically looking at sustainability from broader perspective, because sustainability is, as an innovation, it is created by people after all. So we need to have people on our side, but that means that we also need to take care of our people properly so that we create environment for them to be successful with these sustainability innovations. So I really, really love that. But I love the whole debate, but unfortunately I'm watching time and we are getting towards the end of our discussion. So I saw some questions in live chat. They are directed to Heidi from Frank Kalberg. So thank you, Frank, for your questions. But I think that we will pass these questions to Heidi so that she can answer in writing when we put together an article after this webinar. And for the last 3 minutes, hope you recognize the challenge, I will have very brief question to all three of you, but I would ask you to keep it short, basically 1 minute per person. So if you would like to summarize anything from this webinar, not necessarily what was said during this conversation, also what was said during previous conversation or anything from the book, just feel free to share the takeaway that you would like people to remember. So Heidi, let's start with you.
Thank you, Lenka. This has been fantastic. What I would say is that to thrive in the world of technology disruption, we must embrace change. And that begins with people. People are the core of enterprise sustainability. People are the core of business agility. People are the core of digital transformation. People are the core of sustainable innovation. Enterprise sustainability demands sustainable innovation. So this is how this is all connected, at least to my mind. And, the emerging truth is that people are the competitive advantage. Talent is the key differentiator for organizations to sustainably innovate. That's why I fervently believe that the most important strategy for doing well while doing good is to invest in people.
Thank you. Thank you for saying these words, Heidi. So, Alice, what would be your takeaway if we are supposed to remember one thing? What is that?
Yeah, I think it's also related to people. For me, listening to the conversations we've just been having now and the previous panelists, what has stuck out is the importance of inspiring people, actually, and the people. You need people to provide that inspiration to come up with the innovation and the creativity. AI is never going to replace human creativity in totality. So just the importance of thinking about how do we do that? How do we bring people along within organizations, within society more broadly, and not losing the really compelling and exciting and inspiring message, by focusing too much on the difficult things that we need to do. So yeah, there's inspiration and inspiring people as being the secret ingredient for all of this.
Thank you. Thank you. So I was really truly inspired by what Marco said. So Marco, do you have any more things for us to think about and to take away from this webinar?
Yes, I mean, what comes to my heart about all I listen here is really the courage to take a step and to make a difference. We all are innovators, and we all can be innovators. And the book is about innovation. It requires courage and protagonism to go beyond and to exercise empathy. So if I say what I listened from Alice and from Heidi, a good tip is, and it's a very hard soft skill, is how can we gain more empathy? So we will be able to see in a different way. We will be able to exercise reperception, because the world is here. It's just a matter of how we calibrate our eyes, our ears, to feel it, to see it, because it's already here, the answer. So we just need to exercise empathy to solve what is important first, empathizing with people, with the planet.
So if I summarize it for me in 3 words, maybe 4, sorry. So we say we need to embrace the change, and at the heart of embracing the change are people. We need to care about our people. It's important to be inspiring so that we ignite that innovation by being inspiring, showing examples. And last takeaway is we also need to have courage to think differently, to do things differently. And that courage should be fueled by our empathy for planet and for our impact. So this is really, truly wonderful. And thank you so much for this conversation. We are at the end of our session, so I will hand it over back to Stuart. And again, thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, Lenka, Alice, Marco, and Heidi. It's such a great discussion. Marco really embodies the notion outlined by Heidi that we must embrace disruption, a truly disruptive role model. I loved his line about valuing people's time by collaborating. And thank you to Eddie, Kaihan, Hamilton, and Brian for the great session which preceded it. So what can we take away from all of this? Well, what I'm taking away is this: the challenge and the response is and has to be truly global. Today we had Eddie and Marco from Brazil, Emil in Denmark, Heidi, Kaihan, Lenka, and Brian in the States, Alice from the UK, Hamilton from France. Sustainability requires that we go all in. It's not a decorative extra. As Unilever put it, we need to make sustainable living commonplace. The role of technology is central, as Hamilton Mann points out. AI is a weapon to achieve sustainability, but comes at a price. We have to better understand the interplay between consumers, companies, and sustainability. As Kaihan said, the whole concept of how we create value in the world is not sustainable. And never forget about people. Heidi and Alice reminded us about the very human side of driving sustainable innovation. People can achieve incredible things, but the capacity for learning is now key. Learnability, as someone in the comments phrases it. So there's lots to think about. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining us to mark the publication of Driving Sustainable Innovation. We really appreciate your support and interest. And we hope that today has provided you with food for thought, encouragement to take positive action, and perhaps to seek out the book. Many thanks and farewell for now.